welcome to the Churchy Shed. I want to just first pre-apologize for the pretty poor quality of this video. I shot this 12 years ago. This is our good family friend Skeeter Van Fleet telling his Vietnam story, and it's a fantastic, phenomenal story. So check it out, and thanks for watching. Can you tell us who you are?
My name is Russell Van Fleet, US 55857-378. That was my Army number. I am from Beloit, Wisconsin. I served in Vietnam from March of 1966 to March of 1967. I served in an artillery unit, spent a month on ambush patrol, basically, and I got out of the Army in September of 1967. Got married shortly after that. The next 45 years, raised my family.
So your name is Russell Van Fleet, but what do we all call you?
Nobody knows my real name mostly around town. I'm known as Skeeter Van Fleet.
So if you want to start in high school, so I'm guessing it was your senior year in high school?
Senior year. Well, when I turned 18, I received word to file for the draft, which I did, and I got my draft card. It was 1A. I was working at the Beloit Corporation in the pattern shop. My wife was still in high school. She was 2 years behind me. And we were working, and they kept drafting about three a month out of the pattern shop. We were all that age. And my mother had passed away in 1962, so it was just my father, who's a disabled veteran. And I'd call home every day and ask him, did I get any mail? Did I get any mail? And then about the fifth time I called him, he said, I think what you're looking for is here. And it was my draft notice. And I was to report to Milwaukee, go through my physical. And I went up, reported. There was a bunch of us from Beloit, and we all graduated together, and we went up. They had our physical, and then they had you stand in line, and had you count off by fours. And we counted off, and luckily I was number 3, because when we got done, they said, okay, all number 4s, take one step forward. And when they did, they said, congratulations, you've been drafted in the Marines. And I stayed in the Army then. And
so you didn't have a choice? Like you didn't say when you get drafted, you go, I want to go into the Army, I want to go into the...
No, we assumed it was going to be Army, but then they needed some in the Marines, so they did it that way and drafted them in the Marines. So.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, I didn't either when I went up there. But we got drafted, sworn in, everything in Milwaukee, and then they put us on a train. We took the train to Chicago, picked up another group in Chicago, and then we traveled overnight on the train to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And this was November 2nd, 1965, when I got drafted. And then we went through 6 weeks of basic training. Normally it's 8 weeks, but we went through 6 weeks without any passes or anything, just so we wouldn't have to go back after Christmas.
Okay, so this was 65. How long had the war been going on?
Probably, early 60s, 62, 63.
So you knew about it. You knew what it was about.
We knew probably most of us are going to go there. I finished basic training in 6 weeks before Christmas, and they sent us home with a 30-day leave. And then I got sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, to be trained in artillery. And I went through the full 8 weeks training there. And then they gave us another 30-day leave. And I called my father and told him, well, it looked like our unit, they had only taken 4 people out of our unit to Vietnam. The rest of us were going to Fort Carson, Colorado. And that's probably where I'd be going. Well, the next day they added 2 more people. And I was one of the 2. So I had to call my dad and tell him I ordered the change, I was going to Vietnam. So they sent us home for another 30-day leave. And I spent the 30 days and spent as much time as I could with my future wife at the time. And
so you guys weren't engaged?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
She was still in high school.
Oh.
And so I went on to then I got sent to Vietnam in March of 1966 on my 20th birthday. And The first night there, I got sent to my unit, and I spent in a foxhole, water a foot deep, with tracer rounds going over my head, and I thought, wow, I'm not going to be able to make a year of this.
Where exactly did you go?
I
Where?
went to the 1st Infantry Division in Benoit, Saigon.
So Saigon.
Yeah, right outside of Saigon.
Okay.
Saigon was basically off limits for the 1st Division. We couldn't go there, but this was probably 20 miles away from Saigon. It was called Benoit, and that's where our unit was stationed. And it was 105 howitzer unit, artillery. And like I said, I spent the first couple of nights there, and I didn't know if I could make a full year of it. And then things got better. I got to know people and know what to do, and we ended up, that was our base camp, and then about every other month we get sent out to the field.
I'll just set this on your lap right there.
Every other month we get sent to the field for a month or so, and there you lived in little pup tents, and you always had to dig foxholes wherever you went, and then put sandbags around them and everything. And then, we'd had 6-gun, each unit was a 6-gun, and your goal was to be base piece, which was the main one, which if there was a fire mission for only 1 gun, they would call on your gun, and you guys were considered the best of the 6. And we did that, and then we go back to base camp for a couple of weeks, and we ship out again. But it was sort of scary because every time we ship out, we had a battalion commander and a first sergeant that would warn us every time we went out, well, write letters, you may not get back. And at 20 years old, it was scary, but finally they moved on, and then things weren't quite as bad.
So they were kind of used to kids going out and not coming.
They were gun-ho, and they're, what, you're not going to make it back, so call your families, write a letter, write your last letter. Well, they were a little different, but they moved on, and we got new ones, and it wasn't quite as bad. But every day, we'd get mail every day, and as soon as the mail come, you got your mail. You were supposed to, and if it didn't, a lot of trouble would be raised. But that was the first thing you got. And we, most of the time, ate a lot of, K rations, C rations, whatever, when you're in the field. Otherwise, you had some hot meals. Maybe once or twice a week, they would send in some hot food by helicopter. And we did a lot of airlifting with our 105 howitzers. We put them on the Chinook helicopters, the 2-bladed helicopters. We airlifted with them. You could drive those right up in. We also airlifted with the Chinook helicopters, except every once in a while a gun might get dropped into the river and we'd lose it, But most of the time it was in the Chinooks where we airlifted with them.
So when you went over, you were 20 years old.
Yes.
Just kind of, what were you? Just trying to put into perspective a 20-year-old being thrown into that situation. Like, did you make friends as you went over there? It was kind of like
I traveled with a couple guys out of Janesville for 2 years. We got stationed everywhere together, and we traveled back and forth airplanes, and wherever we were. And we went to Vietnam. We flew out of Travis Air Force Base in California. Mm-hmm. That's where we left from. And we traveled out there together. We traveled back. And we could fly standby if we had our uniforms on, which saved us some money and stuff. And then we basically, while we were over there, we tried to help the infantry out. A lot of times they would be perimeters for us. They would pull our guard. Then finally our guys said, no, we can pull our own guard, which gave us more to do. But it was, pretty scary at nights out there. You could actually, hear wildcats out in the jungle, and you all, a lot of rats and snakes. And,
North Vietnamese, there's other things out there that were
yeah, but they didn't bother you too much, but, you might get bit by a snake, a spider, a rat. You never knew, And then as usual, I drew the short straw for ambush patrol for a month.
When you first got there? Or?
No, it was about 3 months after I got there. And ambush patrol, you send 11 guys out in the jungle at night, and you set up you set up a ambush at a place where you know people are coming through, where they've seen them before, and if they come through, you bring them in, and they question them. You always like to catch somebody, bring them in. You got to come in early, and you went out every other night, and then the other night you were free to do whatever you wanted, you know, drink, party, do whatever you wanted, you know, you were free. But so I spent a month on that, and we got hit, I think, 3 times on ambush patrol.
So you said 11 guys would go out?
Yeah.
Okay.
There'd be a point man. He'd be about 30 yards out in front, and we'd have the sergeant. Then we'd have a medic, the radio man, machine gunner, and then what, 4 or 5 behind us. And you'd spread out, and you'd try to find where you got to be. Sometimes it's hard to find that trail, and then get dark, so you just have to stop somewhere.
And this is no night vision or anything
No.
like. So you're just red flashlights, or what? What did you have?
Yeah, we had flashlights, and you had the radio, you know, and you know, just tried to read a map to get where you got to be, you know. And hopefully you got there before it got dark and got set up. Sometimes we didn't, and then we were in trouble because they were usually watching us, you know. And we got hit real bad the one time. I was machine gunner that night, and the point man got hit with a claymore mine. They set it off a little early, so he got hit, and then the front part got hit, where the guys got injured. Well, I was machine gunner, and it's when it goes off, you know, basically just knocks you down, these mines. Well, then I got mud in the machine gun, so I had to get that cleaned out. My job is to get some rounds fired off then, you know, toward that direction. So I got clean and got some rounds fired off, and then the sergeant, he was injured, and the point man was way out, and he was injured, and he was screaming in pain. And sergeant yelled back, "Well, who's back there?" And I told him, you know, Corporal Van Fleet, you know, I'm machine gunner tonight. And he said, "Well, where's the rest of them?" And I don't know, they're not back here, you know. And he said, "Well, someone's got to go out and get Davis." And I said, "Well, I've just got the machine gunner." He said, "Well, here, take my M14s, that's what we carried for artillery, and go out." So I crawled out, and I was scared. I was afraid I might get shot by my own people because we were all a bunch of young kids, you know. And I got out to him, and he was about 6'5", and his legs had been blown. They were blown, both going that way. So I tried to move him. I couldn't move him without hurting him. So I crawled back, and I told the medic, you know, I can't move him without hurting him. You know. He said, "Well, you do that if you can. Otherwise," well, the medic always told me to move him without hurting him if you can. Well, I told him I couldn't. He was in too much pain, and his legs were totally blown to bits. And he said, "Well, that's the general rule, but if you have to, you move him any way possible." So I crawled back out, still scared as usual. And
what's kind of going on around you? Is it still?
there's still rounds being fired, tracer rounds all around, and you know, from our guns and from their guns, you know. And I got to him, and I told him, "Davis, I got to move you any way I can, you know." And he said, "Well, I don't know if I can do it." So I tied his hands to the rifle, and I dragged him back then. And
so you tied his hands above his head?
Yeah, I just dragged him back. We crawled back and dragged him. And then we got back, and medic treated him, and then we called in a helicopter. And called in a helicopter, and we called for airlift. Well, then it landed about 50 yards out. And being smart as I figure I am, I'm going to help carry him to the helicopter. And when we put him on, I'm going to hop on. You know, so we had a blanket sling, and 4 of us carried him out there.
What happens if you hop on the helicopter? Then you're out for the night, or you're out for a while?
So they'll take you off with that guy, you know. But when we got there and we went to put him on, we put him on the helicopter. I started climbing, and they said, "No, go back. You know, we'll send help out for you." So we crawled back out. 4 of us, and I'm thinking, gee, we're going to get shot by our own guys. I don't know what's going to happen here, you know. So we get back, and finally they send out some Army personnel carriers to pick us up. And they come out about an hour later and then hauled us in. Well, we got back, and they wanted to treat me. They thought I was shot because I was covered in blood, and I tried to tell them, no, I'm not shot, you know. So, and I was supposed to be put in for a Silver Star for it, but the sergeant got evacuated to Japan, and I never got put in for it. So which, doesn't bother me that much. I did get a letter. Davis did live. I got a letter from him thanking me, a couple months later, because he got evacuated to Japan too. So that was probably the scariest moment in my life there.
So go back to just about worrying about your own guys shooting you and the distance from where did the helicopter land? I know you said like 50 yards from where you were kind of down in the
I would say
the
the
fight.
probably landed, I would say from here across the street. I would guess that's what, 30, 40 yards maybe.
Okay.
And then we had to crawl out there, and there's still tracer rounds going all over. And basically, they didn't want to take me. They just want to take the injured.
And it's still just you 11 guys out there.
There was still 10 of us.
10 once Davis went out.
And then when we got back to camp, the sergeant was evacuated to Japan too. And everybody else, nobody else got injured, outside of those two. That was only because they set the mines off too early.
They did?
Yeah, the Viet Congs.
So they had mines set up.
Yeah.
And they set them up. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it was set to go off and probably get about the medic, and then right after the machine gunner would have got most of us, but they set them off too early. And it got the point man way out there, and right about where the radio man medic was, just in front of me. So I was lucky that way.
So, and that was how long had you been in Vietnam when that?
Oh, probably 2 to 3 months, probably.
Okay, so you were still pretty. Would you say you were still pretty new, or you were still considered a newer guy?
That, because we had never done anything like that. We had always been base camp artillery, so we'd never been out in the jungle at night, or anything like that. And it was interesting when we brought someone back. They would interrogate them, and the ones they knew were Viet Cong. They really made it difficult on them. I know we brought back 2 one night, and we had Vietnam, ARVN troops with us that were interpreters, and they would ask them questions, and every once in a while, it wouldn't go well. They actually spit on one of the ARVN interpreters when they asked him a question. So basically what they did was load the other one into a helicopter, took him up in the air, and out he went. Well, the next guy talked.
Yeah.
But,
And was that something that...
I didn't see that often. It was
okay.
one time I saw that.
And was that something that you guys weren't supposed to talk about then? Like was that outside the rules of war, or?
Yeah, you probably don't want to broadcast that.
Mm-hmm.
But, it did happen. I'm not going to say it didn't happen. Just like a lot of stuff with Lieutenant Calley and killing the babies and stuff. And I'm quite sure he was probably just taking orders from up above. But
mm-hmm.
he's the fall guy for that,
And then what kind of information did they get out of that guy then, or they don't tell you that?
They don't tell us anything.
Yeah. And were you right there when they did all that, or?
When they pushed him out?
Yeah.
We were standing there and saw him go up, and all of a sudden there he goes. And next guy talked then.
Yeah.
So the ARVN troops, the Vietnam ARVN troops that helped us,
mm-hmm.
they were tougher on these prisoners than our people were. They didn't take anything from them.
Yeah. And so then from that point on, I just kind of know, like, when you see stuff, it changes you.
Yeah,
would you say from that point on you were a different kid?
Well, that night I realized, I had never shot anybody ever, and I realized it's to a point whether, when you're there, it's either you or them. And one other night we were on ambush patrol, and, it was my time to sleep. You're with another guy, you take turns sleeping. And the guy I was with actually had dozed. And I happened to wake up, and we were in some bushes, and there was a fence there, and I looked up, and there's one climbing right over the fence above me. And that's the only guy I know I really ever shot. I know we killed a lot of Viet Cong with artillery, but the one guy I know I shot was that one, because I just, and he fell back. Then all rounds started going everywhere, after that. But
So it was so I remember you telling me this one. It was you. It was two of you out, like by a fence. You said.
yeah, we paired off in twos and we took turns sleeping, at night like that. And, you had to depend on your partner, stay awake. And this guy had dozed a little bit, which I can't fault him. We're tired a lot of times. But luckily I happened to wake up. So. And he didn't see me down below him, the guy climbing over the fence, which was lucky.
So he was close. As far as how close he was to you when you shot him, could you have touched him with your hand, or was he?
I could have touched him with the gun. He was probably 4 feet away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was, and he fell right there.
Yeah, he just went back, and then all rounds started going everywhere. And the Viet Cong, when you got in something like that, they usually pick up their dead before daylight, because they don't want you to know how many you killed, and they usually round up their dead before morning some way, if they could.
And you could see them doing that, and you would just let them do it, or?
No, you usually didn't see them do it. If we could, if we'd take off as soon as daylight come, we'd head out, And a lot of times, they'd already picked some up, or there'd be some there, but you could see them as soon as we were going. You could see them starting coming in to get them,
Yeah. What kind of stuff did you do there? Like was there a lot of downtime for you? Like dig?
Oh yeah, we wrote letters, and moonlight was so bright there at night. You could sit out in the moonlight and write letters, And we got to go on passes to town, a lot of downtime playing football if we had it. They finally took the football away from us because too many guys were getting hurt. But they took that away, and we had a softball and stuff, play ball, and a lot of them played cards, a lot of card playing. But mostly we wrote a lot of letters, listened to a lot of music, especially tried to keep active when you're in base camp, because then all the rats and stuff hide. They don't come out. But once they go to the field and you're the only one back there, we slept in tents with the wooden floors. And once you're alone, then all the rats and mice come out and stuff at night. Well, I'd move out in the open air and sleep. But, we all had dogs. Each gun section had a dog, that built them a dog house and sandbag his dog house with powder bags from artillery rounds, And we just always kept the dog with us. We didn't take him to the field with us or nothing, but that was just something to keep your mind occupied.
And then as your job, the gun that you took care of and all that.
We it's a 105 howitzer towed unit. Shoot approximately 7 miles accurately. We carried what they called 4 beehive rounds, which basically is if you're being overrun, you lower the tube down, look through it, and shoot it. And it comes out thousands of ball bearings that just wipe out trees, everything. So we always carried 4 of those just in case we were getting overrun. But most of the time, you're shooting 4 or 5 miles. Once in a while, it might only be a mile, and then you went high angle, where you just sort of lofted it up over, on smaller powder charge. The bigger the powder charge, the farther it went. I think, if I recall, there were 7 powder charges in a round. And then they were point detonate fuses as soon as they hit. They would explode. Then you had time ones where you set the time where they would hit, and it might go off 10 seconds later or a minute later, and things like that. But those were the 3 main rounds we shot.
And then when you were fighting out there, and as far as are we winning or are we losing, were you ever worried about that? Like, are we winning this war? Or is what we're doing making any progress? Or did you just kind of serve
we knew sometimes we made progress when we got in there and ended up taking over an area that we were moving into. But as far as what was going on everywhere else, you really didn't know, what was going on. We got into Cambodia. We got all around different places, and probably the nicest area I got was we were stationed for 2 months on an old golf course that was owned by the French at one time. And it was pretty nice because they had a swimming pool and everything. So, you had certain times you could send 2 guys swimming, and that was pretty nice, unit. We worked that as our base camp for a couple months, and then we'd move out from there to the field and then come back. And that was pretty nice. But as far as what the rest of the stuff was doing, we didn't know, we got, most of the time, got enough guys got time off to go to the USO show at Bob Hope, and see that, which was nice because I ended up coming out of the PX there, and one of the guys from my hometown was there that I went to high school with, so I talked to him.
And just from what I understand is Vietnam, a lot of times the big question was, why are we even here? Why are we even fighting? Did that stuff ever go through your mind?
Yes, you wondered, and you got to realize Vietnam was a country that had to be run by somebody. They couldn't really run themselves, and whether it was us or whether it was communists, whoever, somebody had to run them, and you talked to, the different people, and, it was just very difficult situation. You just didn't know what really was going on, a lot of times. You worried about your unit and the people you knew, and you tried to take care of each other, and we were a close unit, some people closer than others, but, I wouldn't hesitate to think somebody would die for their best friend over there if they had to.
Other than writing letters, had zero contact with anybody back here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, only unless there was an emergency, family death or something, then you could get special privileges, make a phone call back. And in fact, my future wife, the only time I talked to her that full year was my last month. I took an R&R in Hawaii, and I called her from Hawaii, and it was about a month before I got out then, and that was the only time I talked to her from the time I'd left. So.
And how many days were you required? How long were you required to serve before you could be done or go home?
1 year. And then if you, when I finished Vietnam, I had 6 months left to do. And they try to talk to you and say, well, if you'll extend here 3 months, then you can get out of the Army in 3 months. You don't have another 3 months to do. And I decided I was lucky enough to make it through 1 year. I would just take my 6 months in the United States, and then I came back. And then we trained National Guardsmen and artillery when I got back at Fort Hood, Texas.
Was there ever any sense of, I'm just counting down the days of staying alive and getting home?
Oh, you count. Everybody has short timer calendar. Every day they'd mark off another day. And everybody knew exactly how many days, probably hours they had left there. If you ask them. And
let's just jump to the end of when you were counting down your last few weeks or months or days. Like, is there anything that sticks out for you?
Well, usually when you get down to 30 days or less, you don't go out in the field anymore. You stay back at base camp, and you pull guard back there and stuff. It's a little easier. And when you get down to a week, you're not supposed to pull any duty. You're just supposed to get cleared to leave the country. And my unit had gone out to the field, and there was only about 4 or 5 of us left back at base camp. And I was a corporal, and we had one sergeant. And he pulled a little rank on me and had me pulling sergeant guard at night, And then if there's any shooting on the guard post at night, you're supposed to go out there, find out what's going on, And I was staying where I was supposed to be, and they were shooting on the guard post, so I was in radio contact with them, what was going on and stuff. But then a colonel come in and asked me who was on sergeant guard, and I said, well, I am, sir. And he says, why aren't you on the guard post with your guards? I said, because I got less than a week, and I'm not going to go out there. And he says, you got less than a week and you're pointing sergeant guard? And I said, yeah. He said, who's in charge here? And I said, well, Sergeant so-and-so over there. Well, he went and yanked him out of bed, made him be sergeant guard, and told me to go to bed. So I spent the next week basically clearing. I had a Jeep to go wherever I wanted. I'd sneak over to USO Club and have a chocolate malt once in a while. It was really good. Anytime you could have milk over there, it was good. We didn't have good milk. We had either chocolate milk or recombined white milk, and none of it tasted real good, you know. But if you could get to the USO Club and get a chocolate malt, it was pretty good. And then I came my last day, and I was shipping out, and they sent you a place called Camp Alpha. It's where you come in and leave. And I went to Camp Alpha, and I processed through, and they told me, go find a bunk. Your plane won't leave till 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I went and found a bunk and went down to USO Club and got a beer, and all of a sudden my name was called, or the loudspeaker report. So I reported down. They said, your plane's leaving in a half hour. I said, okay. So I was ready to go in a half hour, and then it was, I think, a 13-hour flight, if I recall, or something, coming home, you know. On the way over, we had stopped in Alaska, Philippine Islands, and Japan. I think, if I recall, on the way home, I think we flew almost straight through. I'm not sure.
Straight through to where?
To a Travis Air Force Base.
Oh, okay.
And then we processed through there and spent the night at the airport. 2 or 3 of us traveled from Janesville and Beloit and played cards. Then we caught a plane at 8:30 in the morning, flew to Chicago. And at the time in Chicago, there was a Cumberland bus stop across the interstate from the airport, and that's where you caught a bus up to Wisconsin. And a friend of mine, Gerald Nightingale from Janesville, and we went over and got our bus tickets. We were sitting there, and I think it was a Chicago policeman come up and was talking to us and asking us where we were going, what we were doing. We were still in our uniform because we had flown standby to save money. And we said, well, we're going up to Beloit, Wisconsin, you know, just state line, and we're on our way home from Vietnam after a year. And he said, well, when's your flight? And I said, well, you know, 3 o'clock this afternoon, you know, which was 3 hours away, 3-4 hours away. And he said, well, just a minute. And he got on his radio, and then he turned to us and said, get in. And he drove us all the way to the end of the interstate in South Beloit and let us off there. So we didn't have to pay for anything. Turn your bus ticket in, and he'll give us a ride up. He must have called in for lunch and took a quick lunch, but we went about 85 miles an hour up the interstate. And then I had my future wife pick me up down there and brought me home. Then I had another, I think it was 30 to 40 day leave. And then I went to Fort Hood, Texas, and trained National Guardsmen down there until I got out in 1967.
So from the time you got the mail that day until the time you were completely done with the U.S. Army, it had been from when to when?
Probably middle of October of 1965. When I brought my draft notice, probably. And I got out. I actually got out September 1st, 1967, and then I got an early out to go to college. I went to Whitewater for a year, but I didn't know how to study. You know, I went for the 1 year, and then I never went back to school, but I got an early out, 60-day early out.
Did you said not knowing how to study? Is that just did Vietnam?
No, I was always an average student, you know, and as I said before, my mother died when I was 16, so I was pretty much on my own, you know. I was happy to get through high school, you know, and you know, I was an average student in high school, and you know, I did just enough to keep my father happy. Later on, I went back to a vocational school and got an associate degree, but you know, that was probably 5-10 years later. So.
And that so throughout the whole time you were there, did you ever get injured in any way? In any way?
Well, I don't know if it was from there. Since then, I've been diagnosed with a rare liver disease back in 1988. And I went through an experimental program at Mayo Clinic for 5 years. And the medication they gave us there, it's basically the same disease Walter Payton died of. And the medicine worked on 10 out of 200 in the trial, and it worked on me. So I've been taking 5 pills a day since 1988. and my liver is normal, but they said I will always have this disease. And sometimes colon cancer goes along with this disease, so I have to have a colonoscopy every 5 years. And I just finished one 2 weeks ago, and everything's normal. My liver's normal, everything, and pretty happy with that. I have applied for disability through Agent Orange because of that, but they keep saying no, it didn't cause that type liver disease. They say it caused a certain type, but not my type. So, but I am on record in case they ever do decide that it did. And then 6 years ago, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and luckily it was non-cancerous. It was the size of a golf ball attached to my brain stem, and they went in surgery behind my ear and took it out. And I've had my final MRI, and everything's fine with that. I have no problem with that. But outside that, I was never injured. No, not really.
What was your exposure to Agent Orange?
Basically, when we were in the field, they would call in the Agent Orange, and and it was all around us, but I can't.
They'd spray it right on you?
Well, around the jungle that we're going into, but I don't know if we got sprayed right on or not, that I can remember.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's been 46 years, and I'm trying to remember all this. But you don't forget it. You remember the guys' names. You remember everything,
Did your
oh,
hear?
yes, I am totally deaf in the left ear, and that was because of the artillery. I get a disability check for that. I am considered 10% disabled, and my right ear is getting worse. I'm going in 2 weeks to have another hearing test done at the VA, and hopefully get a hearing aid then. And, but outside of that, that's just minor stuff. I've been able to get through that.
And from the pictures in there, you were always the guy on the right side.
Mm-hmm.
So that was always going off in your.
And sometimes you got caught out in front of them, when someone's shooting, and if you're out, the muzzle blast from that would just make your ears ring like you couldn't believe. And I think everybody probably got that at one time or another, got caught out in front. You didn't want to, but you did,
While you were there, did you ever lose any friends from your unit, or?
There was a couple guys I got drafted with, one out of Broadhead, Glenn Young, and when we finished artillery training, he went on to Fort Carson, Colorado, where I went to Vietnam, and they were trained in the 105 self-propelled units. And they came over approximately 6 months later. I never saw him after that, but he got killed over there with the self-propelled units. And then there was a guy from Beloit that my wife knew, his wife, Nolan Black, his name was. And I had seen him in Fort Sill, Oklahoma before I went to Vietnam, and he was being trained as a helicopter pilot. And he got shot down over there. And then there's a couple other guys from the Beloit area. Leonard Talshak, they got killed over there. They were in infantry. But as far as real close friends, no. Probably the closest was the one on ambush patrol there. And he lived, but he just crippled after that.
Are there any times when Vietnam, you think, affects you now? Like, do you have night terrors or anything to that?
No, I've never had any. I've been lucky. I've never had that. I've had dreams once in a while. I got drafted, and I had a family, and I had to leave them. But nothing with Vietnam. I've never had any bad dreams with Vietnam, really.
What family do you have now? Since Vietnam, you've gotten married, and what's your family now?
Oh, I have a son that's 41 years old. I have a daughter that's 39 years old. I have another daughter that's 34 years old, and we got 6 grandchildren. So we've done pretty well. So they're all through college. All my children are all through college, all married and doing well. Grandchildren, I got one heading out to college next year. And the youngest one is 3 years old. I'm sorry.
Okay. When you came back, did you ever feel, were you treated like you were, a lot of Vietnam veterans were treated as if they were crap?
Not personally treated that way. I just felt I felt that way. I felt we were forgotten people. They wanted to forget us. you know. And I still do. I see all the things going on, and I still think the Vietnam veterans were still looked down on, which they shouldn't be. They had they had basically the same thing they have now in Afghanistan, everything, except we were doing it in the jungle, And over there, it's the same thing. You didn't know who you were fighting. They might have a kid walk up with a bomb attached to him. You never knew, and you never knew who to trust over there, And
How do you feel about people calling the Vietnam? I call it a war. Do you call it a war or a conflict?
It was a war. They called it a conflict for I don't know how long, but it was a war. When you lose 70,000 people, it's a war. And that. They say, well, 4,000, 5,000 killed over there. Well, I think 70,000. Look at that. How many? And it went on for what? I think 10 years, 11 months, and 30 days. I think of the war. I think that's how long it was. Something like that. That was one of the longest ones, I think. Now, this one may have surpassed it now, I think. But.
Yeah. Let me just go over my head. Is there anything else you can remember? We can always come back later, and if you remember any stories. But like just simple things like the smell of Vietnam, or the being wet all the time.
Well, you're always wet. You had the main thing you had to worry about was sunburn. It was so hot. And then you get caught in the monsoon season. It'd be 100 degrees and rain on you, and then a couple minutes later it'd be 100 degrees, so you're always wet. In fact, when I was in the field, I took out clothes I'd taken off 2 days before, put them back on because they were cleaner than what I had on. And, you're, like I said, you're just always wet, and if you're not wet from the rain, you're wet from the sweat, and what you end up getting a lot of times, you ended up with what they call jungle rot around your waistbands and stuff, from your pants, always sweating and stuff, and you had to get that treated before you come home, because if you had it too bad, they wouldn't let you come home with it until they got cleared up. But basically, the sunburn, they issued you.
Once you left Vietnam, you've never shot a gun since. You never have.
No, I never shot a gun until I went in the Army, and I shot the highest you could, and I've never shot a gun since I got out of the Army. I'm not a big hunter or nothing. I'm into the other sports. I officiate high school sports and do all that stuff. And I've always been involved in that. As far as, hunting, I have no problem with people having guns and hunting. That's their choice, which is fine. But I've just never been interested in it.
Yeah.
In Vietnam, I went by van. And so when I was at the USO Club and I came out in Vietnam and someone yelled Skeeter, I knew it was someone from home. And it was Howie Davidson from Blight, Wisconsin. And so I talked to him. He was coming home within a month. He had been injured and was being sent home. So he wanted to know if I wanted him to call my father and tell him he saw me and I was all right. And I said, yeah, go ahead. So he did call my father and tell him I was all right. My father was a disabled veteran from World War II. He had lost both legs over in France and when he was 18 years old. And he passed away in 1996 at 72 years old, I think. So I think it affected my father more than me. He had 4 sons. I was the oldest and the first one to go in. And I think it affected him, especially me going to Vietnam, with him worrying more about me than I actually worried about them. And then I had a second brother, a year and a half younger, and he actually enlisted. He went to Germany. And then I had 2 younger brothers, which probably the service would have did them good. And that's when they started the lottery and they drew up in the 300s and they never got drafted. And I checked my number for the first 2 or 3 years and I never got higher than 18. So I guess I was destined to go.
So that's the story for now. Thanks for watching, and make sure you subscribe and like. Appreciate it.